With Gen AI in our students' hands, what that's doing is just pouring gasoline on or accelerating that need to evolve from you memorize a bunch of things and you come in and regurgitate that to, okay, what can you do in this world? How can you work with teams? How can you communicate a compelling vision to others?
Higher education stands at the frontier of the AI revolution. Today, I'm speaking with Chris Agnew, director of Stanford's Generative AI for Education Hub, about how AI is fundamentally reimagining traditional educational models. We saw each other at last month's ASU GSV AI show, and I'm eager to explore how your work at Stanford's Accelerator for Learning is shaping the future of education. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks so much for having me, Ray.
So I'm reflecting back. It was a really interesting ASU GSV AI show. It was incredible to see how many ways generative and agentic AI is transforming higher ed. What did you see that stood out most to you?
I was at the first AI show when it started in, 2024? So just a year ago. So I was excited to see how the landscape had changed from launch in 2024 to our current state in 2025. And I'd say the field is more mature. There are more products out in the world. Saw a lot of different things. I'll lay out kind of how we think about AI's applications in education and then what I saw within that. So we generally think of AI's applications in education falling in one of three buckets. One is as an efficiency play. So can we save our teachers, our educators time? Can we save our back-end systems time? Can we be more efficient at that? That's often the gateway into AI. Two is all about outcomes, ultimately why we're in the business of education. And so can AI move the needle on our student writing outcomes? Can it move the needle on STEM outcomes? Can it move the needle on building of durable skills? But it's all about outcomes. Differentiation, personalization would fit into this category as well. The third category is about reimagining what schooling, reimagining what learning can look like. We'd made a little bit of progress in maturing the field. I think we're starting to shift the conversation from just being in use case generation to start talking about where we're seeing impact, what is actually effective. That is great progress. I would say most of the offerings right now are in the efficiency realm of can we be more efficient? Can we be faster in this process? Can we save people time? There's some that are making claims about moving the needle on outcomes. And I'd say research says right now we need to know more. There's not a lot of data behind that. What I would love to see a lot more of, and I really saw very little of at the AI show, was in the reimagining category of how can we use this powerful technology to rethink what school looks like, how students learn, and we could go more in detail on what that actually can and should look like, in my opinion. But
sure, and it sounds like that's where the most promising opportunities are. And I'm just thinking about the research that you're doing at Stanford's Accelerator for Learning. What emerging patterns or insights have surprised you most from your work so far?
So when it comes to research and Gen AI, we're in early days still. At the Generative AI for Education Hub in January, we launched our research repository, which is the first single source for all the research that exists on Gen AI and education, searchable, filterable by user, by use case, by study design, et cetera. So I'd encourage listeners to go utilize that. I'd say one thing that is rising to the top, which I think is encouraging, is seeing efficacy not in student-facing AI tools necessarily, but actually tools that are augmenting educator practice. So tools that can help teachers in their workflow, in their role as an educator. When done right, this is not replacing the teacher. This is in that efficiency category of, can we save teachers time in these ways that are historically time-intensive tasks, maybe rote tasks or highly repetitive tasks? Can we save them time there so they actually get more time with the things that we know really matter, which is engaging directly with students, that human to human time, and actually embody what we hear about sometimes. I eagerly look for more evidence of this, is how AI can actually make education more human rather than less.
It's interesting because I talk to a lot of faculty at institutions and administrators at those institutions where faculty are very wary of AI. They somehow feel like it's going to be the end of higher education, and the schools are struggling with that balance between embracing AI technologies and maintaining educational integrity, I guess they would call it. So I'm just curious, A, how is your team at Stanford approaching this tension? And B, what do you think about that argument in general? Is it a fallacy to say that AI is going to, undermine the integrity of education?
I don't think it's a fallacy, because I think the clear answer, but often the boring answer because it's more nuanced, it's not the hot take, but the answer is it depends, right? It depends on how it's implemented. So a couple different things. Two of my colleagues, Victor Lee and Denise Pope at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, have done really good research. This is K-12 specific, but it's secondary. So it's secondary school. So it's close to college and university age. Now we're talking about academic integrity, that AI hasn't actually increased cheating rates. What it's done is it's changed the way students are cheating. So they're cheating at the same rates. They're using different tools to do it. Right now, that is AI. So they've done really good research on that. But I think the more important or the deeper question that you're asking is the really hard one, which is new technologies at various points, when integrated well or with impact, change teacher practice. And so let's go way back. To 800 years ago, education was only accessible. Well, it was two forms often. To the most elites, they had access to education through a private tutor. The workforce, or the rest of the population, had education through apprenticeship. It was informal apprenticeship, but they would shadow under a tradesperson, whether it was a farrier making horseshoes or somebody who made wheels for a wagon, and they would apprentice under that and learn. And then through technological innovations, industrial age, we created these things called classrooms, and there was a teacher at the front of a chalkboard, and then they changed their practice to teach to 30 people at a time. In the late 90s, we got something called the internet that was adopted widely. What I would have liked to see at that stage was a recognition that education in the industrial age for the previous almost 100 years had been promising and delivering. We'll give you facts. We will fill you with knowledge. And that's what you get out of education, and you'll memorize a bunch of stuff and to be able to return that. But with the age of the internet, information became more freely accessible, and therefore education should have evolved with that. And the deal should have been no longer, we will fill you with information, but we'll help build skills for you. And then you can access information through the digital world. Well, we've seen some snippets of highlights of evolution over the last 25 years. Largely speaking, the promise of education, certainly within post-secondary, is still been, we will fill you with facts and knowledge, even though in the digital age, information is free, or at least much more widely accessible. So the real value prop of post-secondary should have become skills. And that's a bunch of different things, of like skills of communication, skills of critical thinking, et cetera, with Gen AI in our students' hands, in the hallways outside classrooms. What that's doing is just pouring gasoline on, or accelerating that need to evolve from, we can give you an assignment, you memorize a bunch of things and you come in and regurgitate that to, okay, what can you do in this world? How can you work with teams? How can you communicate a compelling vision to others? And that means changing teacher practice from how they engage with students in the classroom, the assignments they're giving students, how they're assessing what they've taught, and ultimately, like the fundamental question, what is the purpose of post-secondary education?
I wonder, just to follow up to that, do you think that's why some faculty are afraid of AI in their classrooms? It fundamentally means they have to change the way they're doing things. And some faculty like being very innovative and changing what they're doing, but some really would rather not and would much rather things be done the way they've done them themselves in sort of an academic history. Is it a bias on the part of faculty that some are just not willing to embrace that change?
Well, and I wouldn't blame them for it by any means,
No.
because I think generally, like, humans like status quo often more than changing. I've gotten good at this one thing. I've performed well in that. That's why I've advanced to this point in my career, say. And so let's keep doing it. That could be one frame, or the other frame could be, hey, it worked amazing for me when I went through the system that looks similar. And look where it got me. So there can be all these quote unquote, like underlying incentives to keep it the same. The real need and opportunity when you're faced with large disruptions is evolving practice. And this is one that, to be fair to lots of educators, they didn't necessarily ask for. That can be true. And what also is true is it is out in the world. I heard this great analogy from Nicholas Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic magazine recently, of, that you can have two approaches to AI. If AI is the storm that has come and you're in your tent, you can either just like get out of the tent without any clothes on and just scream at the clouds and say, I don't like AI, and just get soaking wet. Or you can put on your rain jacket, put on your foul weather gear, get out of the tent and start working hard to say, okay, how am I going to batten down my tent? How am I going to make sure everything is secure? And I'm evolving my systems so that I'm responding to what the world has given me. In this case, is this really powerful tool that students are using to complete school assignments, say.
That's a great metaphor. And it even reminds me, when you think about the classroom experience and how it's evolved over time with the introduction of technology, one of the examples that I love, having gone to an engineering school, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, is that on the coat of arms for the school is actually a slide rule, which in 1824, late 19th century, that's how an engineer would be sitting there in class. And then all of a sudden, these things appeared. And I can imagine there were faculty there like, you can't have a calculator in my class. You need to learn how to use a slide rule. And yet then they ended up working in places that likely had a lot of calculators around. And those faculty needed to adapt the way they taught. I mean, that's a very micro example of how the classroom changed for like engineering. But help us imagine for a second what the classroom experience could look like over the next decade as AI becomes more integrated into teaching and learning. If a faculty member wanted to batten down their campsite right now and get ready, what approaches do you see forming that are going to be valuable, at least in terms of just guiding principles?
So the analogies here. There are a bunch of reasons people go to college, go to university, seek credentials in that realm. So I recognize that. I'm going to focus on workforce and job readiness, because these days, given the cost of higher ed, that is, data says that is the driving motivator on somebody's reason for going to college, wanting to get a degree or a post-secondary credential. The workforce is rapidly adopting AI. Part of the role of post-secondary is preparing young people for the world of work. And so not building their skills and assessing them in their ability to collaborate with and leverage new tools for them to utilize those in their future workplace is doing a disservice to that individual. It's not preparing them for the future. So there's simply the ability or evolving assessments to not solely assess them on not using an essay to evaluate their critical thinking anymore, but maybe evolve that assignment that was previously an essay to now evolve it to writing with AI and then using an LLM to push and challenge that student to improve their writing and also demonstrate their critical thinking of the actual AI itself, and then submitting that as a whole package and demonstration of their skill as a critical thinker. Say, that's one example. But ultimately, the headline is assessing their ability to use the technology tool. The second one, which gets me really excited about the potential in the future, is I worked my entire career in education in non-traditional learning environments, both K-12 and post-secondary. So these non-traditional learning environments are often outside of the four walls of the classroom, but recognized by more mainstream education. So we might say community as a classroom, apprenticeships, things like that. A lot of what those types of learning environments strive to teach are durable skills, of which more and more employers say that's what they're having the hardest time recruiting, retaining. That's what they really need. And by durable skills, to be clear, we're talking about leadership, communication, teamwork. One of the real challenges historically of teaching durable skills is it's really hard to scale. You might have one teacher who's really good at teaching it, and then it's assessed by a, when you see it type of assessment. Well, there's not research to back this up currently. My eyes are open to the potential for generative AI to be able to coach students and assess students in these harder to assess realms of durable skills and assess at scale that could unlock some of these non-traditional learning environments that actually build the skills that matter to individuals' future success in work and life, these durable skills. So I'm excited to see developments in that realm.
One last question, because this kind of relates to what you just said, that there is this fear that AI-powered education is going to leave behind under-resourced communities or those with neurodiversity or things of this nature. How do we ensure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think there's two components there. One is on the performance side and one is on the access side. And they're two very different things on maybe two sides of the same coin. There's a current debate, and I have not seen any conclusive answers yet on will AI in a workforce setting be an amplifier of gaps or a great equalizer. Some early research I've seen in a workforce setting for early employees is that it can be a great equalizer in that it brings lower performers up versus allowing high performers to accelerate ahead of the rest. And in some ways, this makes sense in that these LLMs are trained on the entirety of the internet, right? And it comes up with like an average. And so it does a great job of like meeting expectations because it's been trained on the average. What it is less good at is coming up with the completely novel out of the box idea. And that is often what separates the top performers. So there's some early research that it brings up the lower performers and can be an equalizer there. More research required. To me, the like more challenging and really important question is the access piece. Could AI be a tool only accessible to those of means and privilege already? And so they have access to those tools and they only run ahead and then leave historically marginalized people, groups behind. A couple important pieces there. And I'm going to give my answer, given your audience, in a post-secondary context. I think there are different considerations for in a K-12 context. But I've been seeing a lot of universities, we can say ASU with OpenAI, we can say Northeastern with Anthropic, that are building partnerships to give students access to all students access to cutting edge technology. A core part of this strategy is to ensure that access to the most powerful tools is equal to all students. All students have access to those tools. So that's one response. The other important equal component is students have access to high-speed internet and the foundational access technology of like a laptop, reliable internet connectivity in their housing and things like that. So when those things are controlled for, I think there shows promise there in school settings where not all students live in student housing, internet access to reliable laptop device can't be controlled for necessarily. I think that is something that definitely needs to be factored in addition to access to the most cutting edge models. But that foundational digital access is essential for schools to be managing for as well.
Chris Agnew is director of Stanford's Generative AI for Education Hub. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us in a fascinating conversation.
Ray, thanks so much. Happy to be here.
So here's my take. The AI revolution in education isn't just about these new tools. It's requiring us to reimagine the entire learning experience, especially faculty. It's clear that generative AI can personalize education at scale while potentially closing achievement gaps, but this transformation requires thoughtful implementation that prioritizes equity and educational integrity and leadership on the part of higher ed institutions. The work happening at institutions like Stanford will determine AI's role in mission-driven higher ed, not just across the US, but across the globe.